Hello adventurers, my name is ShawnSetGO, and today we're making a video that's focusing on the reaction that has come forth from the introduction to the new Hypogean hero, Phraesto, Hypogean. The reason why I'm doing this reaction kind of didn't originally start out with this video. I actually wanted to do a first reactions to Phraesto since I got him. No pity, one pull, just got him, and I was like, oh well, let's do a gameplay. But I posted that into the Discord, and the first reaction in the Discord was actually not even great. It was it was poor. The reaction I got from it was Phraesto useless. And now the reactions are kind of mixed with that. And I know right now a lot of people are still figuring stuff out, but the reason why I wanted to do this reaction mainly is because I feel like there is this brain rot, totally delusion-based idea in AFK Journey where heroes are only as useful as they can be at their max level. Maxed item in one situation only has to be universal, useful across in every game mode possible for people to think a hero is good nowadays. So tier lists, formats, guides, they're all these insane. They're not free to play based. You have people who pay into this game, like Barry here, who I think they mean well and they want people to do well, but they're just telling people straight in misinformation. So let's get into the reaction, talk a little bit more about it. I'm going to interrupt them a bit because I started this video, and like as I saw this in my other monitor, I was like, all right, we need to talk about this and then make our points as well, maybe counterpoints to this, and introduce it. Let's just start it anyways.
So don't worry, there's going to be plenty of videos highlighting the new Hypogean hero Phraesto over the weekend and even later. I wanted to make sure it was clear I am not hyping this hero up. I try to find fun things with heroes, trying to make them work. I did it with Soren. I'm doing it with this hero. Just because I'm having fun and it looks good doesn't necessarily mean you should build this hero.
That's got to be the most insane take. I'm having fun with this hero and I'm having a good time playing it, but don't do it. But don't use it. Now maybe that's a pay to win type take because it's like maybe I bought into it, and buying it to have fun is still paying into it. And this goes for all Hypogean, all Celestial heroes. There's a bit of a disclaimer when getting these heroes in that if you're getting them with guild tokens, unless you've spent time farming the materials beforehand, you're going to have fun with it being base level for a bit. Unless you're already like escalating it to the high levels, or maybe you're buying some sort of bundle to make it your pulls happen more often. Maybe you just get lucky. But you have to have fun with a certain hero at its base level because you're not likely going to be able to build this to the level he's building, especially if you're free to play. It's just not practical. You're not going to be able to do that. You're likely going to get one copy and have to deal with it. So this whole aspect of I'm having fun with it, I think comes with the asterisk of Hypogean and Celestial heroes simply need more copies to get to the level that most guide makers are talking.
That's what today's video is about. Do not build this hero, especially if you are even a low spender, mid spender, free to play. This is not the hero for you. The hero that is for you is Rainier. In the early
I am not disagreeing with that. I think it's a totally valid statement. I think Rainier, I call him Rainier. I think he's a valid hero, even at his base level, because he gives you something that I think is my favorite aspect in the game, and that is nuking back rows. Now, most people talk him from a Mythic Plus standpoint, I believe. Like, I mean, most people say, get him to S plus, and that's why most people are saving it. But insane nuclear take. I don't know why it's an insane nuclear take. It's better to get another hero who's good versus ascending one character to S plus. I know people have this insane obsession with getting the good heroes to S plus, but as a free to play, you don't have that real estate to just ascend characters freely. Now you can get lucky, but why are we basing our reality in luck? It makes no sense to me whatsoever that we're doing that. Yeah, if you get there, go ahead and do that. But for the majority of us, we're getting a couple copies at most.
Whatever game you are, there should be absolutely one goal you have, and that is working your Reinier up to Mythic Plus. Most of you probably already have a Legend, maybe even Legend Plus, even as a free-to-play, and getting up to Mythic is no short task because it takes a total of 8 copies to make your way there compared to the 6.
Who is getting 8 copies as a free-to-play? It makes no sense.
It takes for like an S level hero. And why is that so important? Well, because of Tuned Art, the exclusive weapon unlocked at Mythic Plus. We don't really care about the damage he does, any of that. Basically what's going to be happening though is when we do that dynamic balance, which switches the ally on your side with the enemy on the far side, that is going to make them take 25% more damage. That is really, really good. That is what.
So I think without tuned art, this is still a useful character, because as long as whoever you're putting in that back row can either do one of two things: take damage as well as deal it out, or deals damage really well, they're useful to put in a back row. Like you wouldn't put a Cecia necessarily in that situation, because though she can put a minion back there on her own, you don't want to put her back there. It just doesn't make sense to put her back there. But if you throw a Brutus in there, it's still useful because Brutus has a cheat death mechanic and also can whirlwind in that back row. Also putting an Odie back there, even though Odie's not the best, swapping them out and then putting Odie in the back row to absolutely nuke that back row is good too. So even without tuned art, this is a great ability. I don't think necessarily having tuned art is the big changer here, but I just because on its own, I think it still works.
Why he's used in every boss
good take.
mode. Like
good take. Tuned art is fine.
Boss Reinier is part of the best composition, because how else do you compete with 25% more damage? Doesn't matter how much defense reduction you're doing, bonus other damage. This is just straight up 25% more damage. And then building him to plus 10 reduces that switched ally's damage by 25%, which is a huge survivability boost.
I think he's conflating two comparisons, which I think is the wrong take to do. Comparing a tank's damage reduction to a support's ability to give someone else damage, I think it's a moot point. A tank's gonna tank. The whole part of Phraesto's 30% damage reduction, if you line him up, is one in line with the character's like lore, like symmetry versus opposites is like the whole aspects of them. But also a 30% damage reduction is good for a tank. It's what a tank would need, is damage reduction.
As you guys have seen with heroes like Soren, also who have survivability issues, this solves it a lot. And then in combination that it is dynamic balance, they're getting tons of heal.
I argue that the support giving somebody a damage increase, so increasing their damage taken, so increasing someone's damage taken by 25% versus reducing 2 heroes' damage taken by 14%, so half of it, but also increasing their energy generation by 14%. So a total of 28. So I mean, like, if we're talking stats, I mean, how are we gonna be like, oh well, these aren't the same, or that one's not as good? It's like, it's good, but in a different way. It provides stats somewhere else. And I think this is like a super narrow mindset to be like, the only thing I care about is damage.
And then in combination that it is dynamic balance, they're getting tons of healing too. This is why you have to build Reinier to Mythic Plus first, and absolutely positively, hands down, don't even consider building this hero right now, and we're going to go into exactly why. The first big reason is, even at 1 copy, this hero is not very useful. I tried getting some valid content out of it. I could not. Granted,
wrong. Just wrong. Entirely wrong point. I got 1 copy of him. I was stuck at AFK stages. Stuck. I have my Thorin at Mythic Plus. I have my Entendre at Legendary. Just the way the cards sell. And I was stuck. With him, I have proceeded to complete more than 100 AFK stages and haven't stopped. Things slowed. because I wasn't doing auto stages anymore. Like I had to like position characters certain ways, but I still haven't been stopped. Nothing else changed besides that. Now, of course, I've gotten more rewards, and I'm starting to be able to level things up. But because of Phraesto, I have completed upwards of 125 levels. So I interesting gameplay. By the way, there's not just AFK stages in Arena now, but people are starting to use them as well now because more people are starting getting him. I have ranked up, I think twice, and then because I've only had him for the one day, and then in Dream Realm, I'm now on Hell level. I was hard stuck at level 2, I think it is, and now I'm on Hell. So maybe because he's at end game, he's not experiencing it. But you're not speaking for everybody.
Rioneer, even at 1 copy, at least gets that healing portion of dynamic balance, which also manipulates the battlefield.
Phraesto has a healing aspect to his dot. His main dot effect has a healing aspect, and it maxes out at 40%. 40% healing. And by the way, that's twice for both him and his illusion.
He's usable straight from a single copy, as a lot of support heroes are. The downside with Phraesto is the fact that he is a tank, and tanks need to be able to tank damage. You know what?
30% damage reduction to him and his illusion, as long as they're lined up. Now, he does take about, I think it's 12% hit. So like right now at a base copy, I think he has about 400k health, but it's 400k health twice. If you play with Thorin, for example, Thorin's a great tank. He's one of my strongest tanks. Now, when he goes into his mode, his cheat death mode, where he basically resurrects, comes back up, self-healing, he's going to attack whoever's right behind him. So you kind of have to have an off tank when you're playing with the Thorin, because once he goes down, whoever's behind him is basically dead if you don't have an off tank. Phraesto skips that. He has an off tank standing right there. It's his copy. So you have 2 tanks. It's the same reason CC is useful. You have 2.
It helps tank damage? Stats. You know what one single copy doesn't have? Stats.
His stats are not nominally better or worse than any tank at his level. His stats basically match. The major difference is his abilities. Like there isn't really a stat difference. And this could be part of like just the way they set things up here. Like they're trying to not make him too much better because there would be too much shift. That could mean that he could get buffed later on, in my opinion, because his stats are so basically on par average, if not slightly lower due to him taking a hit due to his pact. But
so this
it's
is
not
a hero
worse.
You cannot afford to not max out. Even in our situation where I have him at Supreme, you can see the difference in power. More than a 10% increase in HP just from going from Supreme to Supreme Plus. And you see an additional defense and magic from physical and all those things. Proficiency goes up. All these things are so important. And then beyond that, getting to Supreme Plus with him is huge because it gives both him and his illusion a gigantic shield at the beginning of battle.
Which is exactly what the character is lacking. And that's why I play the shield artifact with him, because he is missing that. Because of the initial damage he takes, he does need that additional shield to make it work. I think there are other tanks who could also make that work, but I try not to play other tanks when I have Phraesto. But I think the artifact makes this work because his damage is not nothing, and it's actually pretty decent for a tank. His self-healing is good. It just doesn't really have a lot of shielding. So with the artifact, I think that offsets the need for that. But Supreme Plus having that as well towards the end, I think is unfortunate. I think it should be much sooner. I think it should be right before Mythic, to be honest. But it is what it is.
His normal kit is okay. However, there's a couple things
like his hero focus somewhere in there.
Is heavily reliant on this equipment right here. Number one is the fact that when the illusion dies, it deals damage to a target and stuns them for 4.5 seconds. If you don't have this unlocked,
wrong. So the main issue, or the main thing he is reliant on, is his clone's synergy. The issue is with his clone is if him or his clone passes, I believe his 30% buff fades. So basically if one's dying, the other one's not going to fall far behind it. And so that's why I think when you're setting up a Phraesto, you don't want to set them up too far apart just because they're reliant on each other surviving. Instead, rather, you want to set them one tile apart so they're stacked, and then that way they can sort of protect one another. And that to me creates like an insane, like self-regenerating wall, especially with the artifact that keeps them alive. It's not reliant on weapon.
It simply does not stun. Beyond that, there was an issue earlier yesterday where it was actually the summon was resummoning itself at +10. It was corrected to be +15 now, which kind of sucks. Most heroes get their kind of unique ability at +10. Phraesto is at +15. And this is where he'll summon another copy of his illusion if the first one dies and he is still alive.
Great point.
The fact that you have to invest a +15 to really get the max benefit out of this hero and need to go to Supreme Plus, this is probably the most whale intensive Hypogean or Celestial.
This is a good point. I think he makes a good point for whales about this. I think having something that's so crucial to the character being like their skill ceiling, being at the very dead end, I think is something that a lot of people will just be like, well, just get it to the end, but it's not practical for free to play at all. To have that aspect locked behind there is just really unfortunate. I think the hero focus is one of the things where it's like some characters that it's almost reasonable to just forget about it and just not touch it because it's so useless or it doesn't provide enough benefit. And then you have something like S plus, which is so good. And it's like, well, how do I get these Hypogean and Celestial heroes up? It's like, oh, well, you get them up to max. And it's like, oh, my only source for that is guild tokens. And it's like, well, fucking get more guild tokens, I guess. Like it doesn't, I don't know. There's no solution.
I have Scarlita at Mythic Plus. She feels pretty good. I have Reiner at Mythic Plus. He feels pretty good. I even have, where is he? Up the top, Berile at Mythic Plus, a damage dealer. He still feels perfectly fine. Yes, all of them do get enhanced with their Mythic Plus, but they get kind of side benefits with their Supreme Plus. They're not like...
Yeah, Supreme Plus should be just, hey, everything you have, here's a bit more. It shouldn't be something that's crucial to the character's build. Because like I said, I think Phraesto's best aspect is having that clone, and the fact that his clone passing basically removes some of that is it makes him super fragile. So I think that having something like that at Supreme Plus is totally busted.
Meta defining when we're taking a look, is this hero useful? Like, yeah, it can increase the attack for more. Yeah, you can do some additional things with these heroes, get more, you know, physical defense and magic defense and stuff, but they're not like needed. Whereas literally this is probably one of his most defensive passives besides the damage reduction you get for placing them in the same row as each other. And then let me not even like, let's stay on topic. The shield would be huge at Supreme Plus. The stats are needed because he needs to be as tanky as hell. And the other weird thing is the fact that,
I think that he is able to be not as tanky as a typical tank because he is 2 mobs. I think we're ignoring the utility of having 2 placed mobs versus 1 singular focus mob, in that an AI is not going to be able to split that 50-50 or 75-25 in a perfect way, in a perfect world each time. Even if you're doing PvP, for the most part, you can make it to where you're splitting that team's damage effectively down the middle, and he's taking potentially 50% less damage, or each himself and his clone are taking 50% less damage, which is typically right where you need to be so your DPS can effectively destroy theirs. Now, the issue comes now where Phraesto versus another Phraesto, and then additional tanks. I think something that I think is a problem right now in AFK Journey in general is some of the best and most frustrating PvP battles are when you have double tanks. Because what happens for the most part is it creates these fights that last forever. And what happens is the people will typically put a tank in the front and a tank in the back row. What will happen is in a way, it's meta busting, because when you try to attack their back row, now yours get destroyed, and theirs just have insane survivability. It creates these extremely boring, dragged down, just very like basically whose ultimates are going to allow them to survive longer in this situation. And to me, it's extremely unfun. And I already see it going down this direction with Phraesto. People will just simply put Phraesto in the front as this wall, and then they'll put another tank in the back, like one behind him, and it just ends up being this insane tanking fight. I personally think, at least in PvP, there should be a limit in how many tanks you put on the field. I think having a limit on tanks would make the game better and less of a drag.
Where is it here? Where's the one where is it just right in the beginning here? Yeah, if they're positioned in the same row, they take 30% less damage. That's pretty huge. That is big. But some of the maps make it really hard to position these heroes, and it's really, really tricky. His damage is interesting. We did find out that the end scorecard on end of battles don't count his illusion damage as damage for himself. So his damage is actually much higher than it's showing. It's just very...
I would say he could qualify as like a sub DPS, not like a main DPS, but like at least like you would have like a typical support DPS, someone like Cassidy or Parissa, but somebody who is mostly a support, but them working with a DPS makes them actually decent at dealing damage. So whereas I was getting like, if I was getting, for example, if I'm doing like 100k, he's putting out half of that.
Deceptive, and beyond that, his provocation's okay. Taunting enemies within 2 tiles after using ultimate. I mean, like, I guess that's good. It's not...
I don't think he needs a taunt. I agree with him. I don't think the taunt's really that great, because I don't think it's necessary, really.
Not like crazy good, but it's like all his really good stuff are locked way behind it. Even his hero's focus, getting him to legendary plus, increases his physical magic defense by a ton, 30%. And then whenever one of them loses 10% of max HP, the other gains 25 energy. You can see right here, it's 50%. Like, you can see... I
think that's a solid hero focus, even though I think Supreme Plus shouldn't still be locked that far beyond, because I think that's typical for a hero focus for a tank.
See, he has some crazy raw stats when it comes to physical defense and magic defense. His HP does fall a little bit behind, but yeah, I just can't see this being a good copy. Like, I tried doing one hero. I was gonna make a whole video about, is one hero copy good, and I just came to like too fast of a solution of no, it is not.
I think this is an issue not necessarily with Phraesto, but just the way that AFK Journey works as a game, is that heroes on a base level do not work when you're already end game. So the way that characters are built, they are built for basically they're built for working for like maybe end of story, and maybe like pre like 1,000 levels AFK stages, that level, not where he's at, not where Barry's at. We're talking about a couple weeks in game, like a month of game time into the game, and not where he's talking. And so heroes like Phraesto, if you have to max them out in order for them to be viable in general, then that's a problem with how characters get built. All characters should be good doing your current level of content at one copy, but that's just not how this game is played. A lot of characters are quite useless at their beginning, and aren't useful until Mythic Plus. Even that goes for a lot of characters, not just Phraesto.
There are some weird niche uses for him, and like we showed you guys in King Croaker, it was like decent, nothing crazy, stupid, overpowered. I've tried him in normal PvP lineups, going up against like some of the more traditional teams. I think I tried like a summoner team against like the more traditional team. It did not work very well. I tried him in like my Mauler team. It didn't really work very well. The only thing I could see him potentially like working really good with is like the traditional stall team, where you have like Damien in your lineup, you chuck in a Haywin in your lineup, you're running Granny, you're going like that fully defensive team. If that's the case, it can work really well. But again, one of the only places I've really found him to be really great.
I don't think he works really well with defensive teams. I think that he needs a team that honestly will allow his lack of defensive capabilities to be offset by damage dealers who don't necessarily need to be positioned right next to him. So I think he works really good with ranged characters. I think he works really well with minion summoners, people like Cecia, people like Florbell. I think he works really well with like Odie as well. It's something, one of my favorite combinations is, of course, using a Rainier, positioning the DPS you want right behind Phraesto, and then Rainier right next to them, and then making it to where Rainier will teleport that DPS who's made a pact with Phraesto to that back row with an increased energy generation, increased damage reduction, and then that person nukes the back row. So I think it is useful. I just think I think he's making a solid point in that his best uses are in like your typical AFK stages where you're able to experiment with that. But to me, that's the majority of content for a lot of people, is doing AFK stages and in that situation. So I'm going to kind of skip over this real quick because this is where he's going to talk about this a bit. And then we'll wrap up this video real quick.
Overall, I want to make sure everybody's aware. I'm not going to hype this hero up. He does have some uses, but it requires ridiculously heavy investment in him. That is a positive thing because that means the power creep in this game is going very, very slowly. It's not as exciting when a new hero comes out, but at the same time, you're not having FOMO like I used my summons on the last one. Now I don't have any for this one. So you can kind of play it a little more slow. Let me know what you guys think. Hopefully you guys enjoy this one. We're going to have a bunch of videos talking about this hero. So if you guys do love the aesthetic, you like the tank hero aspect, I'm going to show you guys how to use this hero to the best of my knowledge. Hopefully you guys enjoy this one. Hit that subscribe button. I'll see you guys next time.
So this was Barry's video. Barry makes a lot of videos, and for the most part, the videos that it kind of follow along a similar line. I think he speaks to a great level with heroes and characters in AFK Journey from a whaler's perspective, end game whaler's perspective, because he can talk to a degree of, all right, here's maxed out weapons, here's maxed out everything, how it looks. But I do not think he talks from a very educated or solid standpoint from a free-to-play perspective. That is not the current game for free-to-play, and it's just not how it plays out, plain and simple. He does have uses. Like I said, I'm sitting at like 200k less base power level on my AFK stages, and I'm clearing levels super easy, at least 100 stages. I'm clearing arenas. I'm clearing Dream Realm a lot easier. And that is just one day after having this character. So I disagree with a lot of his points, a lot of really bad takes from this. And that's why I wanted to make this reaction. Honestly, is Phraesto the best character, best tank for any situation? Absolutely not. It's a different type of tank that we haven't seen in the game. Whereas Entendre CC or Thorin's cheat death mechanic are great. He has an aspect where he can be both main tank and off tank himself, as well as support to his team and be decent DPS as well, which is kind of in line with how Hypogean and Celestial heroes have worked in general. So my recommendation, if you can, get at least one copy, try them out for yourself. Don't let my words be the words that you take to your game. But honestly, I think that this whole idea of like, don't even give it a chance, leave that for Soren and Alsa, who weren't that great of heroes. Fine, skip them over. But I don't think Phraesto falls along those same exact lines. And that's really all I got. And, leave in your comments what you think about Phraesto. If you think he's good or bad, I'd like to hear it. We also stream Monday, Wednesday, Friday live on Twitch. I'd love to hear your comments there when we're there. And then for all of you, may fortune favor your journey. May your pulls be blessed. And I'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace.